So, friends, in our next uh, plot, we have, you know, a presentation by me, and I shall try to say a few words. One, what I call, what usually is known as Prasthānabheda. The reason I am, let me just share my screen. Um, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Uh, you know, for last few days, we have been listening to many important debates, questions, and issues that have been, raised in different systems of classical Indian philosophy. So mostly, all these questions and debates are sort of located within the realm of philosophical discourse, philosophical analysis. But philosophy is also, more generally speaking, an expression of a cultural ethos, right? And this, I think, was best expressed in the first lecture that we had in this course uh, on the Vedas, on the Vedic thought, on the Vedic ideas. So, right now, what I shall try to do is to locate philosophy, classical Indian philosophy, in a larger, conceptual scheme where alongside philosophy many other discourses, many other intellectual systems were developed in classical India. And I hope to show by my talk now to how philosophy in particular, how philosophical ideas or questions uh, are associated with or related to or in consonance with the larger, classical Indian knowledge system. We these days we come across this expression, Indian knowledge system, and I think this is the right opportunity to explain in detail what we mean by Indian knowledge system. We shall use the expression prasthana bheda if we would like to translate this expression, English expression, Indian knowledge system, we can say Bharatiya Prasthana Bheda. Now, this entire talk actually uh, uh, rests on a thought commentary written by Madhusudana Saraswati. Madhusudana Saraswati is usually known as a staunch Advaita Vedanta philosopher. I think day before yesterday in our talk on Advaita Vedanta, we did refer to Madhusudana Saraswati's works. Madhusudana Saraswati, although was a staunch Advaita Vedanta philosopher, he was at the same time a great bhakta, a great devotee of Krishna. In many of his works, Madhusudana Saraswati very eloquently, very poetically expresses his devotion to Krishna. So, the reason why I am pointing out this dual, aspect of Madhusudana Saraswati's philosophical work is because uh, these two views, along with many other views that we have in philosophy and uh, in our knowledge system in general, are not exclusive to each other. They are not necessarily in opposition to each other. So somehow a kind of syncretic outlook is defended by Madhusudana Saraswati. Madhusudana Saraswati, you know, uh, was a contemporary of Akbar, the Emperor Akbar. Uh, in Aini Akbari, we find reference to few scholars for whom Akbar had great respect, and Madhusudana Saraswati was one of them. His, detailed life story is not known to us, but this much we know that uh, you know uh, he was most probably he was born in what is now Bangladesh, but later on, uh, migrated to Varanasi, the intellectual capital of India that time, where he spent most of his time, uh, where he wrote most of his books. Uh, his famous works on Advaita Vedanta uh, is called Advaita Siddhi, and there are many other books he wrote defending Advaita position. But at the same time, he was, as I said, that he was a great devotee of Krishna. So he also, wrote quite well-known books on bhakti also. And he was, the story goes that he was a great friend of Tulsidas in Varanasi, who, wrote his Ramacharita while Madhusudan Saraswati was in Varanasi. So we have very famous, shlokas where Madhusudana praising Ramacharita author Tulsidasa. So these are, some of the uh, 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 stories about his life. Uh, he also wrote a very, very famous commentary on Srimad Bhagavad Gita, known as Gudhartha Deepika, where he actually tried to, establish a kind of Advaitic interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. But today I shall be, speaking on a very small commentary on written by Madhusudana Saraswati, and this commentary is known as Prasthānabheda. This is a commentary on one shloka of Shiva Mahimna Stotra. Shiva Mahimna Stotra is a long, stuti in praise of Shiva. Okay, it is written by somebody called Pushpadanta. So Pushpadanta is the author of this Shiva Mahimna Stotra, and Madhusudana Saraswati wrote a commentary on one verse of this Shiva Mahimna Stotra, and this commentary is known as Prasthānabheda. Now, the particular shloka of Shiva Mahimna Stotra on which Madhusudana Saraswati wrote this commentary runs as follows. Tri Sankhyang Yoga Pashupati Matang Vaishnavamiti Prabhinne Prasthāne Paramida Mada Pakshamiti Cha Ruchinang Vaichitrad Riju Kutila Nana Pathajusham Nrinam Eko Gamya Swamasi Payasam Arnava Iva. The last two lines of this shloka was made famous by Swami Vivekananda when he quoted this in his famous Chicago lecture. What does this shloka mean? This means that Tri Sankhyang Yoga Pashupati Matang Vaishnavamiti. So Pushpadanta is referring to certain views. Trayi stands for Vedas, Rik, Sama, Yajur. Why is Atharva excluded? Well, there was a debate in classical India between the Mimamsakas and the Naiyayikas. And the question of the debate was whether Atharva Veda could be regarded as a Veda or not. We are not entering into that debate now. So, Trayi, the three Vedas, Rik, Sama, Yaju, Sankhya, Yoga, Shaiva, Vaishnava. There are many such views available. And people, according to their inclinations, according to their dispositions, accept one of these views. But all these views lead to one ultimate reality, which here is called Shiva. So, you, Shiva, are the ultimate goal. All these different paths ultimately lead to you. But why all these different paths? Ruchinang Vaichitrat Riju Kutila Nana Pathajusham. So, Vaichitrat, Ruchina. Different people have different ruchi. Different people have different inclinations, different likes and dislikes. So, according to the individual likes and dislikes, people accept one of these different paths. And some of these paths are straightforward, some of these paths are roundabout ways. But as different rivers following different paths reach the same sea, all these different paths similarly reach the same goal. So this is the meaning of this particular shloka of Shiva Mahimna Stotra, on which Madhusudana Saraswati has written this commentary called Prasthānabheda. Notice that in this shloka, the second line starts with Prabhinne Prasthāne. So there are different prasthanas. Now the question arises, what are these different prasthanas? So Madhusudana Saraswati, in his Prasthānabheda, actually gives us a kind of synoptic summary of these different prasthanas, of these different views, including philosophical schools, including the darshanas that we have been talking about in our course. This particular commentary by Madhusudana Saraswati was first published in 1795 by an Indologist called Thomas Holbrook. Thereafter, this commentary was also translated into German by another famous Indologist, Albrecht Weber, and of course, Max Muller refers to this particular commentary in more than one places in his articles on classical Indian knowledge system. So let us now, start talking about Madhusudana's Prasthānabheda. Madhusudana is actually explaining those two words, prabhinne prasthane, different views, different prasthanas, different paths. Now, all the disciplines, all the paths, all the prasthanas, either directly or indirectly, aim at analyzing the nature of God. This is what Madhusudana thinks. So all the prasthanas that Madhusudana will be describing in this commentary are ultimately aimed at presenting their views of what God is like. And here God basically means the ultimate reality. So let us now describe the features of these different disciplines, of these different prasthanas that either directly or indirectly aim at analyzing the nature of ultimate reality. First, we have four Vedas: Rik, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva. Here, of course, Madhusudana explicitly refers to all the four Vedas, including Atharva Veda. Then we have 6 Vedangas: Shiksha, Kalpa, Nirukta, Vyakarana, Jyotish, and Chanda. We shall explain a little bit in the course of this discussion what these Vedangas are all about. So first we have 4 Vedas, then we have 6 Vedangas, then we have 4 Upangas. What are these 4 Upangas? Purana, Nyaya, Mimamsa, and Dharma Shastra. Notice how Madhusudana locates Nyaya, Mimamsa within what he calls Upangas. So we have 4 Vedas, we have 6 Vedangas, so 10, and then we have 4 Upangas, so 14 Vidyas we have. Now, Madhusudana is explaining that under Puranas, we are including Upa Puranas also. And Vaisheshika system is included in Nyaya. And Vedanta is included in Mimamsa, which is sometimes known as Uttara Mimamsa. Ramayana, Mahabharata, Sankhya, Patanjala, Pashupata, and Vaishnava systems are included in Dharma Shastra. So notice Madhusudana locates not only Rama and Mahabharata, these two great epics, but also Sankhya and Patanjala and Pashupata and Vaishnava systems under Dharma Shastra. So, thus, 4 Vedas, 6 Vedangas, and 4 Upangas. So, thus we have 14 disciplines. Chaturdasha Vidya. Yajnavalkya Smriti actually refers to these 14 disciplines. Then we have what we call Upavedas. Which are these Upavedas? Well, Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Gandharva Veda, and Arthashastra. So these 4 are called Upavedas by Madhusudana. So if we add these 4 Upavedas to our 14 disciplines, Chaturdasha Vidya, that we referred to just now, so we have now a complete landscape of all the classical Indian intellectual academic systems which are known as Ashtadasha Vidya. So 18 disciplines, 18 systems of knowledge Madhusudana mentions in his Prasthānabheda. And all the Astika philosophers, either wholly or partially accept the thesis or the fundamental conclusions of these disciplines, of these 18 disciplines. So, when we talk about Astika philosophers, we mean those people, we mean those philosophers, those academicians who accept either wholly or partially the discourses, the conclusions that we find in these 18 disciplinary studies, Ashtadasha Vidya. What about the Nastika systems? Well, among the Nastika systems, Madhusudana mentions the Madhyamika philosophers who actually rest their philosophy on Shunyavada. And the fundamental idea of this Shunyavada, as Madhusudana explains, is that the objects in the world do not have any essence. Swabhava Shunya. The other Nastika system that Madhusudana refers to is the philosophy of Yogachara. The fundamental idea of Yogachara philosophy, as Madhusudana, understands it, is the thesis of momentary knowledge episodes. So, knowledge alone is real. Vignapti matrata. And these philosophers, the Yogachara philosophers, argue that through constant practice and meditation, not the kind of meditation that Patanjali refers to, one can arrive at this stage of Vignapti Matrata. Since a certain kind of yogic practice is required to be able to arrive at this stage of Vignapti Matrata, this is also known as Yogachara Marga, Yogachara Pantha. And in our lectures earlier in this course, several speakers talked about the Yogachara philosophy. The other Nastika system that Madhusudana refers to is Sautrantika philosophy, that talks about momentary external world that is to be inferred. So, the Sautrantika philosophers, according to Madhusudana, hold the view that the external world is anumeya, vajyartha anumeyavadi, as they are called. And then we have the Vaibhashika philosophers. Madhusudana places Vaibhashika philosophers under the rubric of Nastika system. And these Vaibhashika philosophers talk about Swalakshana, momentary external world that could be directly perceived. So notice the distinction between Sautrantika and Vaibhashika. Sautrantika philosophers hold the view that the knowledge of the momentary external world is to be inferred, anumeya. Vaibhashika philosophers hold the view that the Swalakshana momentary external world can be directly perceived. Bhajya Pratyakshavadi. Now, so these are the Nastika systems that Madhusudana refers to in his Prasthānabheda. There are two other Nastika systems that Madhusudana refers to. The Charvaka, of course, the Lokayata philosophers, who reject the idea of self that is independent of body, and the Jainas, especially Digambara Jainas. They accept self, but their idea of self as in some way identified with body makes them, according to Madhusudana, a branch of Nastika system. So, the different versions of or schools of Buddhism, the Digambara Jains and Charvaka philosophers, they are branded as Nastika systems by Madhusudana. So these are the 6 Nastika systems And Madhusudana argues that since these systems are opposed to the Vedas, they don't accept Veda Pramanya, and these systems are neither directly nor indirectly conducive to the attaining of the four Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. That is why Madhusudana does not really explain these views in detail. This is Madhusudana's explanation of why he has ignored these six Nastika systems, because they are opposed to Vedas and they are not, conducive to the idea of four Purusharthas, Chaturvarga. And this is very important because all the other prasthanas that Madhusudana refers to, and we shall be explaining now, Madhusudana argues that all these different prasthanas, all these different, systems of thought, directly or indirectly, contribute to obtaining this Chaturvarga, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So for Madhusudana, the entire corpus of classical Indian cognitive pursuit in its different varieties, in its different pantha, in its different paths, all of them in some way or other contribute to attaining Chaturvarga, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. I think we should bear this point in mind while trying to understand the motive behind classical Indian intellectual pursuit. Now let us start talking about the Vedas. The Vedas consist of two parts, mantra and brahmana. Mantra brahmanayor Vedam. Yaska and many other early commentators, early thinkers, define Veda as consisting of mantra and brahmana. What do we mean by mantra? Well, first, mantra denotes the objects to be used in yajna. We must remember that entire Vedic discourse proceeds around the idea of yajna. So yajna was one of the central ideas, especially in the early Vedic period. So when we talk about mantras in Vedas, one of the features of mantra, a bunch of sentences, a set of Vedic sentences that refer to the objects, to the things to be used in yajna. Also, some of the mantras in the Vedas talk about the gods presiding over the yajnas. We have reference to many yajnas in the Vedas, and many of these yajnas are understood as, as having one god presiding over the yajna. And many of the mantras actually talk about these gods who supervise, so to say, the performance of yajnas. Now, one could talk about three kinds of mantras. The first is the Rik mantra, consisting of padas and mostly written in Gayatri Chanda. So Rik mantras are, mostly composed in Gayatri Chanda. Some of the famous Rik mantras that are still, used by people every day, like Agni, etc., etc. These are all famous Rik mantras. Then we have Sama mantra, mantras that are sung, mantras that are not only uttered, but they follow certain specific methods following which they are sung. And then we have Yajur mantras. Some of Yajur mantras are also called Nigada mantra. And these Yajur mantras, they are actually invocation of different gods. Okay, so they invite different gods before the performance of the sacrifice. So this is the kind of analysis of the different statements, different sentences that one finds in that part of Vedas which are called mantras. Then we have Brahman. Brahman is of three kinds. Brahman sentences of the Vedic corpus, are usually analyzed into three kinds. One is Vidhi sentence. There's a lot of discussion in Mimamsa philosophy about the analysis, first the grammatical analysis and then the following philosophical analysis of these Vidhi sentences. Without getting into those details, let us, for the time being, let us say that Vidhi sentences are those sentences that generate a disposition in the hearer to act. So Vidhi sentences are action-oriented. Action or the verb is central to any Vidhi sentence. We have some sentences known as Nishedha sentences, opposed to Vidhi sentences, where certain acts are, prohibited. So Vidhi sentences are those sentences that tell us to perform certain acts, and Nishedha sentences are those sentences that tell us about not performing certain kinds of acts. So the first kind of Brahmana sentences is known as Vidhi sentences. Then we have Arthavada sentences. Sentences expressing either condemnation or praise of an action. So, you see the difference between Vidhi and Arthavada. Vidhi sentence directly tells the hearer to perform an action. Arthavada does not tell the hearer to perform an action, but Arthavada sentence praises certain kind of action and condemns certain other kinds of action. Why do they praise certain kind of action? And why do they condemn certain kind of action? The idea is that once the hearer, the listener, hears the Arthavada sentence that praises certain action, then there will be a disposition generated in the hearer to perform that kind of action. And similarly, if an Arthavada sentence condemns a certain kind of action, the hearer would be inclined not to perform that action. So these are called Arthavada sentences. Then we have the Vedanta Vakya. This is Madhusudana's own way of locating Vedanta Vakya among the Brahmana sentences. Vedanta Vakyas are those sentences that generate knowledge of Brahman. And this knowledge cannot be known through any other pramana. So the aparoksha knowledge, the direct knowledge of Brahman, can be had only through these Vedanta Vakyas. Sometimes Upanishads are said to consist of Vedanta Vakyas. Sometimes we talk about four Mahavakyas, Ayamatma, Brahma, etc., etc., as Vedanta Vakyas. But the main point of Vedanta Vakya is that it generates direct knowledge of the ultimate reality, Brahman, and this knowledge cannot be had, we cannot have this knowledge through any other pramana like pratyaksha, anumana, etc. So we have mantras, we have brahmanas. This is how Madhusudana Saraswati explains the different disciplines that come under the Vedas. Then we have Vedangas. We talk about 6 Vedangas, 6 disciplines, 6 systems of knowledge that are required. Knowledge of these 6 systems of knowledge is required to have a proper, adequate understanding of the Vedas. The first is called Shiksha. Shiksha is basically the science of phonetics. you can see that in the Upanishads, sometimes the word shiksha is spelt with rasa e, small e, small I. Sometimes it is written with long I, dirgha e. Both the spellings are correct. Both of them refer to the science of phonetics. Sometimes, in order to follow the meter, the chanda of the mantra, sometimes, shiksha, the word shiksha is spelled with short I, short E. Sometimes it is spelled with long I or dirgha E. This act of pronunciation was of crucial importance in Vedic times because with the change in pronunciation of a word, the meaning of the word also gets changed. And since at that time we didn't have any written record, so once an error occurs, that error will be transmitted down the generations, and there would be no way, no yardstick in terms of which one could think of correcting it. So the entire, you know, uh, science of shiksha or phonetics was developed. It was developed first by Panini in 5 chapters. Sometimes we have subsidiary discipline called Pratishakya, and this Pratishakya text aim at explaining the meaning of different Vedic sentences. So we have Shiksha as a branch of study, which is one of the Vedangas. Then we have Kalpa. Kalpa granthas, Kalpa books, aim at explaining the significance of the Vedic yajnas. So, Kalpa is more philosophical in nature. And there are many, many books written under this Kalpa discipline. Then we have Nirukta. Nirukta is actually a kind of dictionary explaining the etymology of the important Vedic words, Vedic names. Yashka is said to be one of the most important author of Nirukta. And then we have Vyakarana that analyzes different word meanings, that analyzes each word into elementary parts and explains how the meaning of the whole word is constituted out of the meaning of the smaller parts. And Panini's Ashtadhyayi is perhaps one of the most well-known, most famous, work on Vyakarana. Then we have Jyotish Shastra. Jyotish Shastra determines the units of time because several Vedic rituals, Vedic yajnas, are to be performed in specific time of the day. Some of the Vedic performances, are to be performed for a certain duration. So, for all these, successful uh, performance of the Vedic rituals, we need to have a science of measurement of time. And this was done in the Vedanga known as Jyotish. And the last Vedanga is known as Chanda. Chanda, knowledge of meter of the Vedic sentences. This is also very important because the mantras, the Vedic mantras, might have different meanings, might express different meanings, depending on the specific chanda following which the mantra is uttered. So, we have a system, we have a science of chanda, and Pingala is one of the first persons who introduced Chanda Shastra to us. So you see, these are the 6 Vedangas, 6 disciplines, 6 knowledge systems. And each of these Vedangas are, developed in the course of time. Each of these Vedangas, consists of many, many important works down the generations. So each of these Vedangas, culminated into an individual system of knowledge. So we had Vedas, we have Vedangas, then we have Upangas. The first Upanga that Madhusudana mentioned is Puranas. What do the Puranas talk about? Puranas talk about the Srishti, the creation, the destruction, the law, and sustenance, Sthiti. Puranas talk about the lineage of different gods, the lineage of different sages, different rishis. So Puranas, in this sense, are historical studies in classical India. And there are 18 Puranas, and there are also 18 Upapuranas. Among the 18 Puranas, we have Brahma Purana, Padma Purana, Vishnu Purana, Shaiva Purana, Bhagavata Purana, Narada Purana, Markandeya Purana, Agneya Pramana, Bhavishya Purana, Brahma Vaivarta Purana, Linga Purana, Varaha, etc., etc. And there are similarly 18 Upapuranas. And in one of the Puranas, known as Vishnu Purana, we have reference to all these 18 Puranas. So Puranas are stories. They offer, in Indian, classical Indian sense, histories of 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 the world, the gods, etc., etc. It is, sometimes Puranas are said to be written by the old sage Veda Vyasa, and it is also said that Ashtadasha Puraneshu Vyasasya Vachanadvayam Paropakara Punyaya Papaya Parapidana. In the Puranas, Veda Vyasa wants to defend these two main cases, Paropakara Punyaya. So, if you want to, if you can be, uh, beneficial to others, if you can be helpful to others, you can gain punya, papaya, parapiranam. If you uh, uh, inflict pain on others, you will gain papa. So these Puranas, including the Upa Puranas, are repository of partly history, partly morals, etc. The second Upanga that Madhusudana talks about is the Nyaya or Anvikshiki. And we all know that Gautama is the author of this Nyaya Shastra. And there are 5 chapters in this Nyaya Shastra. And this Shastra explains 16 Padarthas, Shodasha Padartha. Why? Why does Gautama explain these 16 Padarthas? Because once one acquires knowledge of these 16 Padarthas, one acquires Tattva Jnana, the knowledge of reality. So you see, even Nyaya Shastra, according to Madhusudana, aims at the attainment of the Chaturvarga that we talked about earlier, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And of course, with Nyaya, we also talk about Vaisheshika, which is sometimes, these Nyaya and Vaisheshika are known as Samana Tantra because they have lots of similarities uh, in many ways. And this Vaisheshika explains 6 Bhava Padarthas and also Abhava. So this is the second Upanga that Madhusudana refers to. The third Upanga that Madhusudana talks about is Mimamsa, which includes the Uttara Mimamsa or Shariraka Mimamsa. Jaimini is, the author of Mimamsa Sutra. With these sutras, the Mimamsa philosophical tradition starts, and this contains 12 chapters explaining the nature and pramana of dharma, focusing on different aspects of karma, Vedic rituals. So once again, you see that the ultimate aim of Mimamsa is to establish, is to explain, is to account for dharma, which is one of the Purusharthas. And Shariraka Mimamsa Uttaramimamsa contains 4 chapters, and Vadarayana is said to be the author of these, uh, sutras. And it starts with the promise to explain the nature of Brahman, the ultimate reality. In the 4 chapters, in the Vadarayana Sutras, the nature of Brahman and the identity of Brahman and individual self, all these are explained in great details. So the third Upanga, Mimamsa and Shariraka Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa, this is how these 2 branches of Mimamsa contribute to our understanding of Chaturvarga. The fourth Panga is known as Dharma Shastra. As we all know that there are many Dharma Shastras, Manu, Atri, Vishnu, Parita, etc., etc. What do these Dharma Shastras talk about? These Dharma Shastras talk about the dharma of different varnas, the dharma of different ashramas, and our prayashchitta vidhi and ashaucha vidhi. Prayashchitta vidhi talks about the kind of punishments that one has to undergo if one violates his or her dharma. And ashaucha vidhi talks about the different rituals that one is expected to perform in accordance with his or her varna and ashrama in order to have a complete, fulfilled human life that contributes to the attainment of Chaturvarga, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Interestingly, Madhusudana locates Mahabharata and Ramayana, these 2 famous epics, within Dharma Shastra. So, Mahabharata and Ramayana are also to be considered as pramana of dharma. There are many, many passages in Mahabharata and Ramayana where people talk about the difficulty of following dharma, the questions that one faces while performing dharma, and also the proposed solutions to the dilemmas that one might face while performing dharma. So probably this is the reason why Madhusudana has placed Mahabharata and Ramayana under Dharma Shastra. So Vedas, Vedangas, and Upangas have been discussed. Now we have Upaveda. Now, the Upavedas that we shall be talking about are actually related to one of the Vedas. So the first Upaveda that one could think of, that Madhusudana alludes to, is Ayurveda. And this Ayurveda is and Upaveda of Rig Veda. There are 8 parts in Ayurveda. That is why it is called Ashtanga Ayurveda. We know that Charaka is probably the most important author of Ayurveda work. But notice that Charaka's work is known as Samhita. Samhita means compilation. So this clearly shows that even before Charaka, there was a long and rich tradition of Ayurveda. Charaka uh, is probably the first person who compiled all these views of Ayurveda in his Charaka Samhita. And there are 8 aspects of Ayurveda that Charaka talks about. Shalya Tantra, Shalaka Tantra, Kaya Chikitsa, Bhuta Vidya, Kaumana Bhritya, Agada Tantra, Rasayana Tantra, and Vajikarana. These are all different sub-disciplines. These are all specialized areas under Ayurveda, like surgery, like what we call these days ENT, psychiatry, etc., etc. And we have a long commentatorial tradition of Ayurveda following Charaka. And thus, we had a fully developed medical science in classical India. One noteworthy point is Madhusudana places Kama Shastra under Ayurveda. Why? Because, interestingly, Madhusudana writes, one is required to have the knowledge of Kama Sutra to generate Vairagya. So, the idea is once one possesses adequate knowledge of Kama Sutra, adequate knowledge of Kama Shastra, one knows how, where to deal with the different aspects of Kama, and following this discipline, one could develop a sense of Vairagya. See, once again, we see that Ayurveda also aims at those Chaturvarga, those 4 values: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. The second Upaveda is called Dhanurveda. This is the Upaveda of Yajurveda. Vishwamitra is said to be the author of Dhanurveda. Dhanurveda basically talks about, the science of weapons. And you will be surprised to find the different works written in Dhanurveda that talk about different kinds of weapons, that talk about the different uses of weapons, and a detailed description of how to use them. They talk about Ayudha. In Dhanurveda, we find reference to different kinds of Ayudha. Mukta Ayudha, Amukta Ayudha, Mukta Mukta Ayudha, Yantra Mukta Ayudha. Different kinds of weapons. We have reference to Shastra and Astra. Different kinds of weapons. We have reference to different kinds of military power. Those days, elephants, horses, chariots, and of course, the normal artilleries were used in war. And in different books under Dhanurveda, we find a detailed description of these different kinds of weapons and their use. And it is said that the dharma of a Kshatriya is to maintain the state, to maintain peace in state. And to maintain peace in state, it is required to punish people who deviate from dharma. And for this, we need to have a knowledge of Dhanur Veda. And this Dhanur Veda, which is said to be authored by Vishwamitra, consists of 4 chapters: Dikshapada, Sangrahapada, Siddhipada, and Prayogapada. And all these different chapters talk about different kinds of weapons, their use, etc., etc. So we had a completely developed, science of weapons, science of artilleries in classical India that Madhusudana talks about in his Prasthānabheda. Then the next Upaveda is Gandharva Veda. And this Gandharva Veda is said to be an Upaveda of Samaveda. We all know that the unique feature of Samaveda is that the mantras of Samaveda are to be sung, Sangita. And out of that lineage, Gandharva Veda originated, and Bharata is said to be the author of this Gandharva Veda. And this could be of many kinds. We have, science of music, Sangita. We have science of instruments. We have all other different aspects of theater and other performance, and detailed analysis of all those could be found in the works of Gandharva Veda. Interesting to know, once again, that Madhusudana holds that knowledge of this Gandharva Veda is required. Why? To attain Nirvikalpaka Samadhi. Once again, see there's a reference to Chaturvarga. Because through a proper understanding of Gandharva Veda, one could bring calmness in his mind, okay, through which one could attain Nirvikalpaka Samadhi, and one could, attain moksha. So Gandharva Veda ultimately is a moksha shastra. And then we have the fourth Upaveda, which is known as Artha Shastra. This Artha Shastra is Upaveda of Atharva Veda. Artha Shastra, according to Madhusudana, consists of the following disciplines, following studies. Niti Shastra, which is basically a science of politics, a science of statecraft, a theory of state. Then we have Ashwa Shastra, veterinary science of horses. So we had a completely developed Ashwa Shastra in classical India. There are references to works of Ashwa Shastra. Then we have Gaja Shastra, veterinary science of elephant. Then we have Shilpa Shastra, the science of architecture. And no wonder that this Shilpa Shastra was quite developed in classical India. Otherwise, how could we explain the magnificent buildings of ancient India, the magnificent temples, etc., etc.? They must have a very, very advanced knowledge of Shilpa Shastra, of architectural engineering. Then, under Artha Shastra, we have Sup Shastra, culinary science, the science of cooking. So we had great chefs in ancient India who were proficient in Stup Shastra. And of course, then we have 64 kinds of Kala Shastra, Chatushashti Kala. And if you look at the list of these 64 kinds of Kala Shastra, that includes music, theater, painting, decoration, facial, producing ornaments, welding, sculpting, and whatnot. I mean, these 64 kinds of kalas, kalas, you could see all the possible, expertise that we need to have a very nice, well developed, in every sense of the term, a well developed, happy society. All these sciences, all these disciplines were talked about, were described, were presented under these 64 kinds of Kala Shastra. So, Madhusudana, while referring to the original mantra of Shiva Mahimna Stotra, where that word Trayi occurred, Madhusudana argues that Trayi stands for all these 18 disciplines, Ashtadasha Vidya. Then, of course, we have these 5 philosophical systems: Sankhya, Yoga, Pashupata, and Vaishnava Pancharatra. These are the 4 philosophical systems which are still, very much prevalent in different parts of India. So you see that Madhusudana offers a very brief description of these, five shastras, five philosophical disciplines. Madhusudana ends his commentary, Prasthānabheda, by concluding that all these different systems, from the Vedas to the Upangas, all these different systems were developed so that people with different dispositions can follow any one of them. So we have differences among people. There are bhinna ruchi. There are different likes and dislikes, and depending on that, people follow these different disciplines. And all these views are correct. And all these views are correct, for they are written by great scholars. So none of these, views is false. These scholars produce these prasthanas, okay, to prevent people from being misled by the tantalizing external world and the anti-Vedic views. So for Madhusudana, all these different prasthanas are meant to attaining the Chaturvarga, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, so that the apparent, dazzling external objects do not mislead us, do not take us away from the path of Chaturvarga, and of course, so that we don't get misled by the anti-Vedic views. So that is the reason why these different scholars, these different, saints, they have written, they have produced all these different prasthanas to help mankind in general. So I would like to conclude, this talk by drawing your attention to the fact that for Madhusudana, when he talks about different prasthanas, and we have very briefly we have looked at all these different prasthanas, all these different prasthanas, to quote Shiva Mahimna Stotra, all these different prasthanas lead or contribute to attaining the Chaturvarga, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And so all these differences that we have among the prasthanas are somehow, obliterated, or somehow, washed away when one attains that ultimate goal. We can call it moksha, we can call it nishreyasa, etc., etc. So, following the verse of Shiva Mahimna Stotra, as all the rivers mingle in the same sea, following different paths. Similarly, all these prasthanas, following different paths, okay, lead to the attainment of Chaturvarga. So this is how, Madhusudana Saraswati comments on the famous shloka from Pushpadanta's Shiva Mahimna Stotra. So I end here. If you have any questions or comments to make, please come forward.
Thank you, sir, for your informative and illuminating lecture. I really enjoyed it, and I have a query that why Shvetambara Jainas are not included in the Nastic system by Madhusudan Saraswati?
Yeah, right. That's a question that I also ask myself. Uh, probably, I mean, one of the reasons could be those days when Madhusudana was writing this commentary, probably the Digambara Jainas were more powerful, both intellectually, maybe more popular. So he had to somehow encounter this Nastika system. So probably that's one of the reason why he specifically mentioned the Digambar Jainas. So this is a probable explanation, a hunch for me. Yes, that's something that naturally that this question arises. Yes.
Thank you, sir. I also think that the view of Shvetambara is more modest. That's why he was not.
Probably. Yeah, could be. Yes, yes.
Thank you so much.
Sir, regarding the classification of four Upangas,
Mhm.
Nyaya and Mimamsa came as main Upangas, and Shankha and Yoga came under another Upanga, Dharma Shastra. So, what is the cause of this classification? Because we know the Nyaya, Mimamsa, Shankha, Yoga, all these four are four systems of Indian classical philosophy. So he according to Madhusudan Saraswati's classification, Nyaya and Mimamsa are coming directly under Upangas, and Shankha and Yoga are coming under another Upanga, that is Dharma Shastra. So is there any genuine cause behind this classification?
See, Madhusudana does not explicitly, mention the reason for his classification. But just on behalf of Madhusudana, one could think as follows. See, these two systems, the Mimamsa, the Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa, they are basically hermeneutic study of the Vedas. Okay, so they are more concerned with the interpretation of Vedic sentences. And in order to interpret the Vedic sentences, they came up with certain principles of interpretation of language, especially of the Vedic language. And later on, it could be also, those principles could be applied to our Lokika, our ordinary language as well. But, both the Mimamsa systems, I mean, the Purva Mimamsa and the Uttara Mimamsa, they are basically interpretative of the Vedic sentences. Now, the Nyaya, on the other hand, is basically a science of reasoning, a science of logic. But notice, and this is important, this science of reasoning, this science of logic does not end in logic itself. This science of reasoning, this science of logic talks about the 16 padarthas. Why? Why do they undertake this study of these 16 padarthas? Because they hold the view that these 16 padarthas, knowledge of these 16 padarthas would lead one to nishreyas. So once again, this being corroborative or conducive to the attainment of Chaturvarga becomes very crucial here. So when that is the reason why I think Professor Mishra this morning was also referring to this. When we use the corresponding English expressions, sometimes it could be very misleading. We use the expression Indian logic. Well, it is not Indian logic in the sense in which logic is used in West. We can call it Anvikshiki. Why? Because Anvikshiki is a science of reasoning through which we could have a proper, adequate, correct knowledge of the 16 padarthas, leading us to Nishreyas, to Chaturvarga. And I think Madhusudana, in more than one places in this commentary, refers to this, that all these disciplines, all the systems that he is talking about, either directly or indirectly, are conducive to Chaturvarga.
All right. Yes, sir. And sir, hasn't he used the word darshan for any category in his classification?
No, he hasn't. Darshana is a very what should I say? Is not an old expression found in classical texts. Okay, uh, so tattva is more frequently used.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you
I
very much,
think,
sir.
yeah, I think S.N. Dasgupta mentions this, that probably the word darshana for the first time occurs in Madhavacharya's Sarva Darshana Sangraha. So that is not very old book.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Any other question or comment?
Sir, may I ask one?
Yes, please.
Uh, yes. Sir, is it audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Sir, I used to ask that uh, Shilpa Shastra is coming under Artha Shastra. You have mentioned.
Yeah.
Sir, can you give me any reference that I can find this thing in any source text, primary or secondary source text, that Artha Shastra, under Artha Shastra, Shilpa Shastra is coming?
See, there is a book by one Bengali great Pandit, Jogendranath Tarkatirtha.
Jogendranath Tarkatirtha.
Tarkatirtha.
Acha.
He has a book called Mahabharat, Prachin Bharater Dandaniti.
প্রাচীন ভারতের দণ্ডনীতি।
Dandaniti.
আচ্ছা।
There in that book, I think in the first chapter, he talks about the word danda. What does it mean? And
Acha.
there he also talks about Artha Shastra as used by Kautilya. The term Artha. Okay.
Okay.
And I think you can find some discussion in that book. But let me see if I can find out some exact reference about Shilpa Shastra coming under Artha Shastra. I shall definitely let you know, because not much discussion has been there on Madhusudana's Prasthānabheda. Okay.
Okay, sir.
People, for I don't know for whatever reasons, tend to ignore this. But I thought that this is a very interesting, very short commentary that really gives you a synoptic view of classical Indian, knowledge systems. And as you might guess, that many of these books of these different knowledge systems have been lost. So we have reference to the names of some of these books, but unfortunately, many of these things have been lost now forever.
আচ্ছা, তো স্যার স্যার আমি বাংলায় বলি কথাটা।
Please.
স্যার, আমি যোগেন্দ্রনাথ তর্কতীর্থ উনার বইটা ফলো করলে আমি এই রেফারেন্সটা পেতে পারি। আর আরেকটা বললেন স্যার মধুসূদন, যার যার পিপিটিটা আপনি দিলেন না, যে পিপিটিটা আপনি দিলেন সেটার একটা ফলো করবো। সেটা বইয়ের নামটা
This has been translated once or twice, but very old translation. Okay, but still, it's worth looking at.
আচ্ছা, এই দুটো বই থেকে আমি মোটামুটি একটা রেফারেন্স পেতে পারি যে শিল্পশাস্ত্রটা
I think so. Yeah, I think so. আর
স্যার আমি যদি ডিফাইন করতে চাই যে বাস্তুশিল্পশাস্ত্র, এটা কি শিল্পশাস্ত্রের আন্ডারে আরেকটা পড়ছে বাস্তুশিল্পশাস্ত্র, মানে আবার সাব ডিভিশন হচ্ছে, মানে আমরা তো বাস্তুশাস্ত্র বলি
না। এখানে কিন্তু the way Madhusudana Saraswati has formulated it, he uses the word Vastu Shilpa Shastra. Okay.
আচ্ছা, ওকে। আর তাহলে স্যার বাস্তুশাস্ত্র যখন বলা হয় তাহলে সেটাকে স্যার কিভাবে
এটা I really don't know whether how long it goes back in our history. Okay. I think there are references to these Vastu Vidya in some of the Vedangas.
বেদাঙ্গ। আচ্ছা স্যার, একটা তো আমি জানতে পেরেছি, সেটা হচ্ছে স্থাপত্য বেদ, সেটা হচ্ছে অথর্ববেদের উপবেদ।
হুম, হুম, হুম।
অথর্ববেদের একটা উপবেদ হচ্ছে স্থাপত্যবেদ। তো
Yes,
সেখান থেকে আরো মানে ব্রাঞ্চ আউট হয়েছে। তো
yes, yes,
আমি
yes.
শিল্পশাস্ত্র যে অর্থশাস্ত্রের মধ্যে এসছে সেটাও আমি পেয়েছি, যে কৌটিল্য অর্থশাস্ত্রের মধ্যে মিলিটারি আর্কিটেকচার বা মিলিটারি ইঞ্জিনিয়ারিং এর যে ফোর্ট ডিজাইন,
Yes, yes,
ডিজাইন
yes,
গুলো সব ওখানের মধ্যে লেখা রয়েছে
yes.
কৌটিল্যের অর্থশাস্ত্রে। বা টাউন প্ল্যানিং এর যে প্রথম
Right,
কথাটাও
right,
সেটাও শিল্পশাস্ত্রের মানে কৌটিল্য অর্থশাস্ত্রে বলা রয়েছে।
right,
এই
right,
রেফারেন্স
right,
গুলো আমি
right.
সাথে লিঙ্ক করতে পারছি।
হুম, হুম, হুম,
তো
হুম।
সেই জায়গা, কারণ যখন জার্নাল লেখা হয় এগুলো যদি আমি কোট করা যে রেফারেন্স এইখানেই প্রথম বলেছে, এখানে সেই আমি জিনিসগুলো জানার চেষ্টা করছি আর কি।
হ্যাঁ, 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 exactly, exactly, exactly.
এইভাবে
হুম,
বাস্তুশাস্ত্রের কথাটা ঠিক কোন,
হ্যাঁ,
বাস্তুশাস্ত্র কি ব্রাঞ্চ আউট হয়েছে শিল্পশাস্ত্র থেকে, সেটাও
হ্যাঁ, হ্যাঁ,
লেখা আছে
হ্যাঁ।
কোথাও, সেটা আমি একটু খোঁজার চেষ্টা
See,
করছি আর
I
কি।
can see a book named Vastu Vidya
হুম
edited by Ganapati Shastri. হ্যাঁ,
হুম হুম হুম, এটা আমার কাছে আছে স্যার। হ্যাঁ,
আচ্ছা, আচ্ছা, আচ্ছা।
গণপতি শাস্ত্রী, আচ্ছা, হ্যাঁ,
হ্যাঁ।
ওনার আচ্ছা
There is
ঠিক
another book I can see named Shilpa Shastra. It's in
হুম
English.
হুম
It's published from Lahore in 1928
1928,
by
আচ্ছা।
Fanindranath Basu.
হ্যাঁ স্যার, ওটাও আছে, ফণীন্দ্রনাথ
আচ্ছা,
বসু।
আচ্ছা।